Sometimes people get the impression that the God of the Old Testament is an angry God. He's wrathful and he's carrying out his displeasure for the rebellious nature of mankind by sending plagues and other various negative things to mankind as a result. Whereas the God of the New Testament is the God who sends Jesus. Why? Because he loves the world and he's a God of grace and mercy and patience. And this is really an unnecessary dichotomy because he's the same God. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And this week's portion of the narrative, we find Joseph in Egypt, and this really depicts what we learn about God is that he is in fact a benevolent, kind God. Where we left off, Joseph was wrongfully imprisoned. And in chapter 40 and 41 of Genesis, we see that he encounters the cupbearer and the baker, the king's cupbearer and baker. He interprets dreams for them, which the interpretation comes true, which lead him to interpreting an important dream scenario for the king, the Pharaoh. Well, this subsequently impresses the Pharaoh to the extent that he puts Joseph in charge of all of the granaries of Egypt. You see, there was a famine coming that was going to be so severe that Joseph proposed a plan that for the 7 years of good, they should put away a fifth of the grain that comes in each year so they would have stores for the 7 years of famine that would be unlike they'd ever seen. And he puts Joseph in charge of that entire game plan. And at the end of Genesis, in chapter 50, we hear Joseph declaring that his own affliction, which others meant for evil against him, ultimately God meant for good, to rescue the lives of many. You see, God is not only concerned about his covenant people, his covenant made with Abraham, then passed to Isaac, and then Jacob, and now Joseph is a part of that covenant relationship. God certainly is very attentive to these lives and being faithful to his covenant blessings to them. But a part of that covenant blessing is that through Abraham, all nations would be blessed. God loves all nations. He loves Egypt, though Egypt is not serving him. Egypt does not serve or acknowledge the Creator God that Joseph would be acknowledging, yet because of God's love, because of his kindness, his benevolence, for even this great nation, knowing this famine was coming, allowed Joseph to be in a position to rescue the entire nation. This is the benevolence of God. This reveals the love of God in the Old Testament. And even as just a small snapshot of who God is in relation to someone like Joseph, we can see application in our own lives that though we are sometimes going through difficulty and affliction, just like Joseph was wrongly accused, put in prison, and so on, we see God has not forgotten Joseph. In fact, he is utilizing that scenario to bring about a rescue, not just for Joseph, but for all of Egypt. It's a part of God's plan. And so when we are in difficulty and we don't understand quite why everything's going down the way they are, we have to understand that God has an overarching plan that is bigger than us. And his plan includes benevolence, kindness, love for the entire world, even though he has a special and unique relationship with his people. For us who have placed our faith in Jesus, we have a unique relationship with God. But by extension, we can be a blessing to all the world. And certainly that's reflective of God's love for all of the world. This is what sparks Jesus' teaching in the New Testament when he says that we should pray for our enemies, be kind to those who persecute us, because God who's in heaven brings about rain on both the righteous and the unrighteous. He brings about blessing and good things to both, whether they serve him or don't serve him. That's the kind of God we serve. And so that builds the principle of being kind and showing love to someone, even if they hate you. The very principle that Jesus endorses in the New Testament is born out of the very character of God, revealed in rescuing all of the nation of Egypt from that plague while using Joseph to do so. This upcoming Sunday, we are going to finish out our study of the book of Genesis, and particularly the character of Joseph. We're in these chapters ahead, we're going to see Joseph being reconciled with his brothers, and ultimately his own conclusion about why he endured such afflictions in his life that would appear on the surface to be unjust. So we're going to look forward to seeing you, hopefully this Sunday at 10:30.